Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to head over to Romania once again for the first time in what feels like a good little while. Now we're going to return to a brewery that has featured on the channel quite a few times before. These guys are quite a well-established Romanian craft brewery, and in my opinion they're one of the ones that have really been quite pioneering and have been pushing Romanian craft beer out across the European continent and further afield. If people were to ask me about them, I would say that they're quite diverse in what they do. They're very well rounded, and the beers have always been pretty damn good quality in my experience. So these guys are definitely one of the Romanian breweries you need to check out. But the beer that we're going to have a look at today is one of their latest releases through the Hong Kong beer shops. We get their beers quite regularly over here, which I have certainly been quite pleased about, but it's a style that I haven't tried from this brewery before, one that I do really quite enjoy, and I have to say I'm just very curious to see what this brewery's interpretation of the style is going to be like. So needless to say, very curious to see what this one's going to have in store for us. Hopefully it's another good beer, hopefully it makes for an interesting review, and as always I hope that you guys watching enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, for this review then, like I said, we are going to head to Romania. We're going to go to the capital region, Bucharest, and we're going to go a little bit to the south of the city to a place called Jilava, and that happens to be home to the wonderful Hooligans brewery. So this particular beer is called Briefcase Boogie. It comes in at 8% ABV, and this one is a West Coast Imperial Double, whatever you want to call it, IPA. So yeah, this is another beer that I picked up from Craftissimo over in Chungwan on Hong Kong Island, if I remember correctly, and it caught my eye. I think this was one of 3 that I actually bought from the last batch that appeared over here, but this is one that I really wanted to try simply for the fact that I haven't tried a West Coaster from these guys before. We've had a couple of hazies on the channel if I'm not mistaken, but yeah, this is definitely the first time we're looking at an old school West Coast IPA, so really curious to see what their interpretation of this particular style is. But yeah, let's crack on with this one then and see how we get on. So, as always with my reviews, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, of course, just fast forward. All the usual links can be found in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Hop Hooligans before, and there will no doubt be more added to that list in the near future. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The support that you give is massively appreciated, and remember you can go into the channel homepage and search for beer using the geography tagging system. So you can go in there, use the little search bar, put in your hometown, state, county, province, whatever you like. If I've reviewed beers from the area that you search for, they will pop up. Failing that, you can check out the playlist of beers from different countries. You'll find this beer of course in the Romanian playlist, which is being added to fairly regularly, but mostly with Hop Hooligans at the moment. I hope we get some of the other breweries out here going forward, but yeah, do check out the playlist of beers from other countries as well, because there are some very good things on the channel these days. And if you are curious about Romanian beer, I would encourage you to try it. I've been very impressed with the Romanian stuff that I've had so far. Hop Hooligans and Biretta are probably the 2 brands that you're most likely to come across from the country at the moment, but other ones are starting to kind of open up and push out there a little bit, so do try them. The Romanian beer scene is pretty interesting. So yeah, let's go on to my brewery notes then, and I'll tell you a wee bit about Hop Hooligans once again. So Hop Hooligans, as I've mentioned to you already, are based in Jilava, which is the south of the capital of Bucharest in Romania, and the company has been active since 2016, and it was founded by Cristian Mihai Dinu and Mircea Georgescu. So the story of Hop Hooligans began when Cristi and Mircea teamed up with Petre Ion, who was the founder of Beer O'Clock, one of the first craft beer shops in all of Romania. But about a year after the launch of the brewery, Petre died suddenly in a car accident in April of 2017, and the times after this proved to be really quite hard for the Hop Hooligans company, but thankfully they managed to persevere and they've gone on to do very well. But they built a reputation for themselves early on by brewing a variety of different styles and doing a lot of collaborations with other breweries across Europe, and that's probably one of the reasons why this brewery is, you know, one of the kind of pioneering Romanian craft breweries along with Biretta. But in 2018 they started canning their beers, and so they became the first brewery in Romania to do this, and the following year they partnered up with Biretta to organise Haze Fest, which was the first Romanian craft beer festival, and this is one that I really do want to check out at some stage. But in September of 2020 they opened up their own tap room in Bucharest, and they've been working to increase the capacity of the brewery over the last few years, as well as building up their sales and exporting their beer to different places, such as here in Hong Kong. But as of July 2024, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced around 430 different kinds of beer according to Untappd, and that number will no doubt continue to increase as time goes on, because this brewery is pretty prolific, and as I say, they're always pretty damn solid in what they do. Their beers have always been pretty impressive for me. But that is all I can really tell you about Hop Hooligans for the moment. If you want to learn more about these guys, you can check out the brewery website, you can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn a little bit more about all the different beers that these guys have done. But like I say, if you're interested in Romanian beer, these guys and Beretta are the two breweries that you're most likely to encounter, and their stuff is pretty damn good. So do try it, and just pick a style that you like, and you will get a very good interpretation of that style in my experience. But yeah, let's go on and actually have a little look at the beer itself. So this one, as you might be able to tell, is a half-litre can, 500 millilitres. I don't know what that is in the American Freedom Unit system, for those of you that are watching from over there. But yeah, this beer is quite interesting. It says on the side here, think of it as an easy deal. See, the fork over solid stacks of moolah earned with all the sweat of your brow, then you get more precious bumps of that juicy, sexy stuff that gets you going. That blast that you can't get enough of, that beat that keeps the monkey on your back for just a few more days. Play it ice cold, cool, and you walk away with a full case of the Boogies. So yeah, as I said earlier, this one comes in at 8% ABV. It's a West Coast double IPA. It contains Heidelberg malt, which is interesting because I studied in Heidelberg in Germany, and I know that they have a stricter law there than the German Reinheitsgebot. It's about the distance away from Heidelberg that the malt and the hops and things can be grown. So there is a Heidelberg beer that's brewed in accordance with the Heidelberg law, but you've got chip malt in there, which is a very old type of German wheat, if I'm not mistaken, and then the hops in this one are Zappa, Amarillo and Mosaic, and then the yeast is WLP001. So all three of these hops we've encountered before. Obviously Amarillo and Mosaic are ones that we are a bit more familiar with. All three are American hops. Amarillo is 12% alpha acid, big oily zesty orange in my experience. Mosaic is 14% alpha acid. It gives you a bit of tangerine, a little bit of earthiness as well. But Zappa is quite an interesting one. It's lower in its alpha acid content, but 8% if I remember rightly, and it gives you this really, the green component on this one is one that I never liked all that much, in all honesty. It gives you this kind of earthy, herbal sort of thing. It's quite a distinctive hop, but it can also give you a little bit of a kind of berry character as well. So yeah, the beer is of course named after the song by Frank Zappa, which is probably why they've used that hop in this one, or is most likely why. But yeah, I think that's everything we need to say about the beer itself. Let's get this guy out into the glass and see what it's all about. I'm really curious about this. I haven't had Zappa hops in quite a while, but like I say, the last time I tried them, I remember not liking them. So hopefully this beer doesn't give me a bad impression of Hop Hooligans West Coast IPAs. But yeah, it's very rare for me to come across a hop or something that I don't like, but it happens to everyone. I mean, as I've said on the channel before, pastry stouts are just not really my thing. Some of the pastry sours as well I just can't really get into. But yeah, for me I like the more kind of old school type things, so I love a West Coast IPA. But yeah, I think we've got maybe about 2/3 of the beer out and into the glass at the moment, and we can have a little look at it. So before the head disappears, you can see that the beer is poured with about 1.5 fingers of a frothy, I would say perfect white head. If I bring it up to the camera, you can see that it has some nice kind of medium-sized bubbles on the surface of the liquid, and the head gets a little bit more bumpy and soapy the further up that you go. But then yeah, you've got this really nice kind of pale golden straw colour to this beer actually, and it's pretty clear. I think the kind of haze that you're seeing on this one is due to the condensation on the glass here. But remember, the colour of your beer depends on a few things. One, the type of malts that you use. This goes a long way to determining your EBC rating. Two, length of your wort boil is going to play a role, because the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise, and thus you get a darker colour of beer. But any barrel aging that you do or adjuncts you put into the beer will affect its colour as well. But yeah, when it comes to IPAs, you don't often have to care about those different adjuncts, in honesty. But and barrels either. But yeah, The colour of this beer is quite interesting too, because for me, West Coast IPAs can lean two ways. They can be a little bit more sort of bready and biscuity, such as the Pliny the Elder from Russian River Brewing, or they can be a little bit more caramelly and oily, such as the Torpedo from Sierra Nevada. Those are the two kind of benchmarks for me, because those were the first two types I encountered. Other people's point of reference might be quite different, but that's what I always think of. So just judging by the colour of this beer and the fact that it's more pale golden and straw-like, I would guess that this one's leaning toward the more kind of bready, biscuity end of the spectrum, but we'll see when we taste it. But yeah, not too much in the way of visible carbonation with this beer. One or two bubbles sticking toward the side of the glass, and you can see a couple of ones just going up toward the surface of the beer. But all in all, this is definitely something I've seen from the West Coast IPAs before, but I would actually maybe go as far as saying this one is one of the lightest that I've seen thus far. But when it's, especially when it's got some chip malt in it and Heidelberg malt, these are German malts, so this should be quite an interesting one to try and quite different from what we've had within this style category in recent times. And I have noticed that West Coast IPAs are getting a bit more popular, which I'm very happy about because I do love them. So yeah, that's everything we need to say about the appearance of this one. Let's go on and have a wee look at the aroma of the beer, because I'm very, very curious about this. Oh yeah, right. I remember that green component, I really do. You're going to notice when you smell this one, the green component in this beer is quite different. It has this almost really pungent, herbal, nettly character, and I remember that's something that really stood out about Zappa for me over the years. I think I tried a Zappa hopped beer at Zmajska Dragon Brewery in Croatia, and that was the only beer that I didn't like that those guys did. I don't know what it was, but it just, I think it was just the characteristics of the hop. But you will notice with this beer, as soon as you smell it, the green component in this one is very distinctive, very herbal, and almost slightly like vegetal in its character. But yeah, let's go into this one again, and we'll try and break the aroma down for you a little bit more in depth. So yeah, beyond that, if we go to the beer generally speaking, it gives you everything you kind of expect of a West Coast IPA, but I think I'm right about this one being more bready and biscuity leaning rather than being like, oily and caramelly. So the backbone, you've got that nice kind of bready character in the beer, you've got a bit of sweetness, you've got a green component to it, and you've also got some oily fruits. These are all things you expect of the West Coast style. But let's have a wee look at the, let's have a little look at the hoppy and malty side of things in this one. So on the malty side of things then, the backbone of the beer is definitely a little bit of that kind of fresh, would I say white bread or more brown bread? It's definitely German though. You can smell European malts are just that little bit drier than American malts, and we know that it's European malts in here, German malts. So the backbone of the beer, it has that lovely kind of, it's got that lovely kind of white bread crusty character to it. You do get a little touch of woodiness out of it and a wee bit of cracker. I do remember the Heidelberg malts were really interesting. The two breweries there, the Kulturbrauerei and Vetters, they did some really nice beers. I do want to get over there and film some out and about videos because those were awesome. But yeah, the aromas out of the malt base in this one are just quite nostalgic for me actually, which is quite interesting. I didn't quite expect that when I bought this beer. I didn't check it, I just thought, oh, West Coast IPA from Hooligans, I'll have one of those. It was pretty much a purchase like that. But yeah, the aroma of this is nice. So you've got that fresh brown bready bread crust in there, like I said, a little bit of woodiness, a little bit of cracker, definitely a little touch of sweet white bread in there, but I would say that it's more of a white bready character you get out of this one, and it does have a little bit of kind of dryness to it as well. But the chit on this one, you can definitely smell that kind of old school. If I remember rightly, chit is one of the oldest varieties of wheat in the world, if I'm not mistaken. But you can smell that little bit of wheaty bitiness at the back of the nose coming out of this beer. So yeah, that's really, really interesting for me. You can smell the bit of wheaty bitiness there, but the wheat actually gives you this smoothness, but it's also pretty dry actually as well. And then above all of that, you start to get the sweeter side of this beer. And the Heidelberg malt in this one, it's given you a little bit of, there's a little bit of biscuit to it, like a little bit of a kind of McVitie's digestive biscuity sweetness. I don't know if I'd go as far as saying sweet caramel, or whether it's more of a kind of like concentrated McVitie's digestive biscuity sort of aroma that comes out of this beer. I mean, it's very distinctive, of course, but this one I think is going to be very, very light. It almost comes across as a smash beer, like a single malt and single hop kind of idea. This one, it's very, very straightforward in terms of its malty backbone. I would say the yeasty side of the beer and the aroma comes across as being sort of quite crackery and white bready leaning, which again is something you'd expect considering the colour of the beer. But yeah, I think that's everything we need to say about the malty side of it. Let's move on to the hoppy and fruity side of things then to round off the aroma. So for me, you have to think about the green component in these beers quite a lot. The green component in this one's actually quite quite wet, I would say, but it does have a good little bit of pungency to it. And when it comes to IPAs, there are 3 types of hoppings you need to think about. You have early addition hopping, which takes place within the first hour of the wort boil. That is responsible mostly for bitterness, and it will give you a very deep, dank green component in terms of flavour and aroma. You've got dry hopping, which takes place after the wort boil is complete, and that's going to give you mostly flavour and aroma, but a little bit of bitterness, and it's going to give you a brighter green component in terms of flavour and aroma as well. Then you've got dry hopping, which takes place after the wort boil is complete. That one's all about flavour and aroma, incidentally, but then it gives you a very bright green component once again. But yeah, for me, the green component of this one, it smells like there's a little bit of all 3 going on. And with West Coast IPAs, they tend to use all 3. New England IPAs tend to rely on late addition and dry hopping. So that's the reason that West Coast IPAs are deeper and danker in their hoppy character, whereas New England's are a bit softer and more kind of juicy and things. So just bear that in mind. But yeah, when you sugar this beer up, you do get a bit of that depth and dankness to it, which you want in this style. I'm not the biggest fan of the new ones that are less bitter, in all honesty. I think this style should be a bit more, old school and bitter, 70, 80, 90 IBUs, something like that. But you can smell that we've got a good green component in this one. There's a little touch of earthiness to it, which is most likely to come from the mosaic. Nice, there is a little touch of pine resin in there, but not too much. It's more like a kind of deep, dank floral aromaticity with a little bit of spiciness to it. And you've also got that nice little bit of grassy floral aromaticity to it as well. So yeah, the way that all of that goes together, I think, in this beer is really, really quite nice. So yeah, a green component on this one gives me what I want, definitely. But on the fruity side of things, this is where it kind of gets interesting. So for me, I'm getting a little bit of an almost melon type quality out of this one, and I think that's probably the Zappa, because the Amarillo and the Mosaic in this one are giving you big, oily orangey and juicy tangerine characters. So yeah, the big oily orange and the zestiness is most likely to come from the Amarillo out of these hops, whereas the juicy or tangerine is definitely going to come from the Mosaic, and that's quite evident in here. You can really smell that nice big orangey character, which, as I say, I really, really quite like. But on the on top of that, there is a little bit of a kind of berryish character to this one, like a little bit of like black currant or something like that. And again, that's something that could come from Zappa. And Zappa, for me, it's just quite a weird hop, because it gives you a bit of melon, it gives you a little bit of like black currant, and then it gives you this earthy, herbal, vegetally sort of thing. So yeah, all in all, I'm not overly sure what to expect from the actual flavour of this beer, but it smells pretty nice. It gives you what you want in terms of a West Coast IPA, and I know that this one's a pretty solid brewery. So yeah, as I always say, take a little bit of time to enjoy the aroma of the beer before you get stuck into it, but I think it is about time to try this one and see what it's all about. So yeah, this one is the Briefcase Boogie, an 8% West Coast double IPA from the wonderful Hop Hooligans brewery in Jilava to the south of Bucharest in Romania. So let's try this one and see what it's all about. Sláinte, skål, cheers, or as they say in Romania, Noroc. A big shout out to my friend Julia, of course, as well, because she likes the Romanian beers. Sláinte, skål, Noroc. Yeah, it's pretty damn solid actually. It's quite a nice and enjoyable beer. I am getting that distinctive sort of earthy, herbal, vegetally sort of thing from the Zappa in this, though. It does take a wee bit of time to get used to, I think, but as I say, when I tried Zappa before, I just wasn't the greatest fan of that green component that this hop has. But you can tell with this one, it's really nicely done. And like I said, it is a more bready, biscuity leaning West Coast IPA rather than anything else. You're not going to get that big, sweet, oily, caramelly character out of it that you'd expect. But yeah, good little bit of malty breadiness in there, a bit of sweetness, good strong green component, and then you've got the oily fruits. These are all things that you would expect of the West Coast IPA sub-style. But yeah, let's just try and break this beer down then and describe it for you a wee bit more in depth, as we always do. So, yeah, for me, this beer is actually really nice, and I mean, I think the more I drink of it, the more I'm going to get used to the Zappa hop. The sort of earthy herbal thing that you get out of it sort of dissipates a little bit the more that you drink of it. Because I think if it didn't have such an earthy herbal vegetable thing, I'd probably quite enjoy the fruity side of the Zappa hop. But that's another story. But let's break the beer down and describe it more in depth for you. So we'll go to the middle third of the palate first, as we always do. So the backbone of the beer, you have that lovely kind of fresh, is it more of a, like a fresh white bready hedgehog roll sort of bread crust in there. As you go further forward on that middle third of the palate, you've got a little touch of woodiness in there, and then above the bread crust you do get a little smattering of kind of a Jacob's cream cracker sort of deal. So yeah, these are things you expect of the beer, but I will say this one is very light in its malty characteristics, but that's not a surprise when you're using only Heidelberg malt, which I think is better suited to like Helles lagers and things like that, in all honesty, and you're using chit. The thing with West Coast IPAs as well is that they tend to only use barley malt in these, and this is interesting because chit is a type of wheat, from what I remember. So yeah, it still comes across as very light, this beer, in that regard, so quite interesting. So yeah, would have been quite interesting to take that German malt base and use, say, higher alpha acid German hops or Slovenian hops and do a proper like European West Coast style IPA. That would have been an interesting experiment for them to do. But yeah, they've pulled off a solid take on this beer. I'd be curious to try a few more. Their hazies have always been good, and if they can do a West Coast IPA like this, the quality of this one is pretty damn nice actually. It's pretty damn good, but I wouldn't expect anything less of this brewery. But yeah, above the crackery layer then, you start to get a little bit of like a slightly brown bready character of the beer. There's a layer of this sort of crisp brown bready note. But then above that, you have, you start to get the white bready character, and the white bready character of the Heidelberg malt is very distinctive because it's got a little touch of sweetness there, particularly at the back of the palate, but as you move further forward it gives you a wee bit more of the dryness, and that's the opposite of what you normally expect, because sweeter flavours tend to come out further forward on the palate, more dry and bitter flavours come out further back. So the Heidelberg malt has always been very distinctive in terms of the sweetness and the dryness, the bready dryness that it gives you, but certainly the malt base in this beer for me is quite nostalgic in a way, because I remember this in all the Helles beers that I used to drink. But above the above the white bready layer, you can feel a little bit of the wheat, so you can feel that slightly dense and more spicy character from the chit malt in there, and that's really interesting as well. The chit's quite an interesting one to use in IPAs, both New England or West Coast, because it just gives you that little bit of bite, but also a bit of a dry smoothness. So yeah, above that wheaty, chitty layer, as I say, the chit's a bit more spicy further back on the palate. You start to get the sweeter side of the beer, so there's a little bit of a smattering of kind of biscuity, like sort of a toasty, biscuity type character out of this one. Above that, you've got some nice, so there's a little bit of a McVitie's digestive biscuity sort of thing, and then in the middle of your palate, there's a little bit of kind of oily sweet caramel there, so you get that nice boozy sweet oily caramel in there, and as you move further out from that, it gives you a wee bit more of a McVitie's digestive biscuit. But on second thought, I don't know if I'd say that sweetness in the middle of the palate there is more caramelly, or if it's more like a kind of concentrated biscuit. Those flavours of course can be attributed to the booziness of the beer at 8% ABV, and that is one of the things with this one, because it's only got the two types of malts. You can feel that this one is slightly boozier, whereas if it had a slightly more diverse malt base, it might, you know, cover the alcohol just a little bit more with sweetness and things. That's one of the things you always kind of run the risk of a little bit with the more bready, biscuity West Coast IPAs, that the beer doesn't really suffer from that. That's just more of an observation. But yeah, the malt base in this one is very kind of straightforward, and I think we've said everything about the middle third of the palate that we really need to. So yeah, let's move on to the back third of your palate then. That border region between middle and back, back third of your palate, you get a nice little bit of bready build up in there. Brown bread in the base and the white bread on the top, and then there's a wee bit of the wheaty bitiness in there from the chit. But the back of that, the base of that back third of your palate, you can feel that nice grainy sort of bread crusty character in there. Above that you have the a little bit of cracker in there, which again is a bit drier. You can feel the brown bready layer in this beer is quite a bit taller and a little bit lighter, more airy. Then the white bready layer in there is really quite tall, lighter and more airy. Both of those layers are slightly drier, of course, and then you can feel just above that the kind of chip malt character is creeping over the top and giving you some of that wheaty bitiness. And then it's all about the yeasty character on the top of that back third of your tongue. So let's look at that. So yeah, for me, the yeasty side of this beer is quite interesting, because it does take a bit of a back seat to the green component of the beer, in all honesty. But yeah, there's a little touch of brown bready character at the centre. There's a wee bit of a more white bready character coming out of it later on, and then you've got a wee bit of a bread crusty note to it as well. But like I say, the yeasty character only comes out a little bit more into the aftertaste, but I do still like how that pieces together in this one. It's really interesting, and I do like how the overall vibe of this beer goes. But I think at that we've covered everything we need to say about the malty and yeasty side of the beer. The only other thing I would add is that the flavour on the back third of the palate is a little bit taller. Then as you move further forward into the middle third of your tongue, it just kind of condenses down and squashes together that little bit more. But yeah, let's go on to the green component of this beer then. So in the back corners of the palate you do get a little bit of earthiness in there, and it's actually a fairly strong earthiness, probably because of the presence of Zappa and Mosaic, both of whom will give you, both of which I should say, will give you that that earthiness. But as you move further forward from that, you get that little bit of herbally, vegetally kind of character that you'd expect of Zappa, and as you push further forward beyond that, you can feel the beer. It does have a little touch of piney resin to it underneath. There's a bit of that deep dankness in there, but then you've got that nice spicy floral aromaticity coming out of the beer, which I really do like as well. So yeah, nice big sort of floral aromatic spiciness coming out of this one. But round the front curve of the palate, you've got a little bit of that lighter grassy sort of note coming out of the beer, and it's just a little touch zesty as well, which I think is good. And again, I think that's attributable to the Zappa hop in this beer. But let's go on and have a little look at the front third of your palate then, and the fruitiness. So the border region between front third and middle third of your palate in this beer, you get that little bit of bready build up in there again. Oh, knocking the can over, my OCD won't be happy. But yeah, you've got that sort of, you've got that little bit of kind of brown bread in the base, the white bread on the top, the wee bit of wheat there. Then the base of that front third of your palate is a little bit more of a kind of, it is a little bit more of a kind of grainy, bread crusty character in the base. So you can feel that kind of wholemeal brown bready bread crust. The crackers there, the dry, I get quite a little bit of dryness actually, and I think the kind of zestiness of the green component in the around the front curve of your tongue there is promoting that. So yeah, dry bread crust, the crackery notes, the brown bread, the white bread, and then the kind of dryness of the wheat as well. Then above that you've got that nice oily bubble where the juicy fruity esters roll their way out of the beer. So yeah, the fruity side of this one is quite interesting in that regard. So yeah, for me, the fruity side of things in this one, it's quite interesting because yeah, at the back of that front third of your palate, you get that nice oily bubble, of course, where the juicy fruity esters roll the way out of the beer, but at the back of that oily bubble, I find that it's quite, there's quite a little bit of melon for me, like that quite distinctive, zesty, melony type quality. But yeah, as you move further forward in the palate there, I'm getting a lot of lemony, limey kind of quality out of this one, which I wasn't quite expecting. But yeah, when you take the beer in, you can feel on the front half of that front third of your palate, there's a little bit more of a kind of oily, zesty Amarillo orange in there, and above that you've got a more kind of tangerine note out of the beer, which is great. You can, and that's obviously the Amarillo underneath and the mosaic on top. But yeah, for me, there's quite a little bit of a lemony, limey character in this one, sitting underneath that, and that of course is the Zappa. Zappa is like sort of melon, lemon, lime. The thing that's surprising about Zappa though is I feel you get that kind of blackcurranty character in the aroma, and there's maybe a little bit of the flavour of it into the aftertaste, but mainly for me, Zappa, it's quite sort of earthy, herbal, vegetal, and then this melon, lemon, lime kind of thing. So Zappa's a little bit of an odd hop to get your head around, and maybe that's one of the reasons why I wasn't the greatest fan of it before, in all honesty. But yeah, certainly interesting to try a West Coast IPA that's quite different with these German malts. But yeah, I'd be curious to see them do a beer like this, but maybe without the Zappa hop, because it's quite, as I say, Zappa's one of these hops, like Cashmere can do it as well, and Fugos is another one. Like, they have quite unusual green components to them. They can be quite dominant, pardon me, in the flavours of beers. So I'd be quite curious to try this recipe without the Zappa and see what it's like. It's not that I dislike this beer, because I actually think it's pretty good, but I think the Zappa kind of dominates the flavour a little bit, whereas the fruitiness and things could potentially be a little bit better balanced if you swapped Zappa for, say, you know, Hallertau Blanc or something like that to give you a more kind of oily flavour, or whatever. Even Hull Melon could be an interesting one to use in this if we're talking European hops, or yeah, something like that. I think this beer, the fruitiness of the beer and the green component could just be that little bit better balanced, but that's just me. As I said before, I'm not the biggest fan of the Zappa hop, in all honesty, but it's an interesting beer and one that has tasted my palate, and after 4,000 reviews you can't ask much more than that, and I'm not complaining about the quality of this. This is nice and I will enjoy the rest of it. But yeah, I think we've said everything we need to about the flavour of this one. Let's round off with a wee look at the mouthfeel. So for me, this beer, it's quite, I'd say it's mid-bodied. It's right in the middle of the spectrum. It's quite light and drinkable for an 8% West Coast double IPA. Carbonation does have a degree of crispness to it. The beer is quite light, clean, and as I say, a little bit crisp and slightly oily as well. But then yeah, in terms of the IBU count in this one, I would say that it is, you know, 60, 70 IBUs. It doesn't feel like it's a full, you know, 80, 90 or something like that. But then again, always take my IBU counts with a pinch of salt, because I have become desensitized to IBU over the years. It could well be the 80, 90 IBUs that you'd expect, and it doesn't say on the can, incidentally. But yeah, the malt base in this one, bit of dryness underneath, smoothness in the middle, and the oily sweetness on top. The fruitiness, like I said, it's quite citrusy leaning, quite a lot of lemon, lime, melon, and then the orangey characters in there as impact flavours, and the green component in this one's a little bit more bitter, earthy and herbal into the aftertaste as well. But yeah, the way that all of that goes together, I think, is quite nice. And I certainly wouldn't hesitate to drink another West Coast IPA from these guys. But like I say, the Zappa hop for me is a little bit of a curveball almost, because it's just quite different. But yeah, I've enjoyed my first West Coast IPA experience with Hop Hooligans, and I'd be curious to actually go and visit these guys and do the Haze Fest and stuff. Hopefully that's something we can do on the channel at a later date. But yeah, let's leave it at that for this one. This is the what was it, the Briefcase Boogie, if I remember the name right, a double dry hopped West Coast double IPA 8% ABV from the wonderful Hop Hooligans Brewery in Jilava near Bucharest in Romania. Once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Hop Hooligans as well, and we will no doubt return to these guys and some other Romanian breweries very, very soon on the channel. Till the next time, Slàinte, Skål, cheers, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Ciao just now.